My name is Augustine, and this is Men Must Pray. On this channel, I talk about speaking in tongues. So if you love speaking in tongues and you want to learn more about it, you're welcome to subscribe. I also run a blog by the name menmustpray.com. So if you want to read articles about speaking in tongues, you are welcome to check out that blog. So today's video, the first time I heard God when speaking in tongues. So that title explains itself. This is a narration of my first time experience hearing God when speaking in tongues. So the first time I received the gift of speaking in tongues was back in 2016, towards the end of the year. After receiving the gift of speaking in tongues, the next question was, how do I hear from God? Because at that time, the people who we were speaking in tongues with were claiming they were hearing from God. And some of them were seeing visions. So, of course, being part of them, I also said, I want to hear from God. And I remember clearly, I asked one of the leaders at that time, how do I hear from God? And the answer the person gave me, he said, you have to open your heart. And of course, I followed up with a question, how do I open my heart? Then the person just chuckled and he really never answered me. I still remember that very clearly. But then that day made me question, like, if other people can hear God, how is it that they cannot explain to me how they're able to hear from God? And so I began a journey of trying to hear from God myself and know what is this thing exactly people say hearing from God. Is it an audible voice to my ears, or how does it feel? And so that is where the journey of hearing from God through speaking in tongues began. And so the days that followed and the months that followed, I persisted in speaking in tongues because I had been told that the more prayerful I am, the more likely I am to hear from God. So I just continued praying, speaking in tongues, attending the prayer sessions and the fellowships that we were having. So that continued until one fellowship, I remember, in 2017. So in 2017, we had a fellowship in our campus and we were praying in tongues. Then towards the end of the meeting, the person who was leading the meeting said, anybody who has a word from God, anybody who has heard anything from God, come forward and share with us. So a few people came forward and they shared what they had heard from God. And I was standing there, I had nothing. Then the surprising thing was that one of the people who had heard from God actually pointed at me and said, God had given me a word, but I had not come forward to say it. And I was surprised because to my knowledge, I had not received anything from God. I had not heard anything. So here is a girl saying that that I have received something from God that I need to share with people. And so they called me forward and they said, share with us what God has spoken to you. And I decided to be very open with them. I just said, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by I should share what God has spoken to me, because I don't know exactly what even it means for God to speak to me. And then they simplified the question and they said, what have you seen when we were praying? And that was simple because while we were praying and I had closed my eyes, I had those mental pictures. So at least those ones I could say what I had seen. So I said, okay, if that is what you want me to say, at least I can remember a few things. And the thing I remember was that while we were praying, I saw a man who was sitting on a horse, a cowboy, with that cowboy hat. He was sitting on a horse in a farm. There was a lot of grass around, that dried brown grass around. And then there were sheep that were feeding on that grass. That was all I saw. So I shared with them what I had seen while speaking in tongues. And then, of course, they interpreted it to mean it was a representation of Jesus being our shepherd. So he was taking care of us. We are his sheep, we are his flock. And that made sense. It really made sense. And at least I felt confident that actually what I had seen was not just my own imagination. It was something that could be interpreted. And so from that day, every other time I would pray in tongues and see anything, I will share it. Some of the things I would see, they would be very common things. And sometimes I would even question if those are just my own thoughts or it's actually God speaking to me. But we were encouraged to just share. Anything we would see, we will just be encouraged to share because we were new. And if what we were seeing were just our own thoughts, we could easily be corrected. So I began just sharing the things I used to see while praying here and there, for about 2 or 3 years. Until one time when now hearing from God took a completely new turn. So the whole theme of hearing from God changed in the year 2020. So in 2020, I had quite a rough year, not because of COVID, but just because of other issues of life. At that time, I was still a young man. I'm still a young man, but I was younger at that time than I am now. And at that time, I really had a concern about my marriage. I had heard a few people say God spoke to them concerning their partners here and there. And I had actually attended weddings of people whom at least they claimed that God had spoken to them and they had actually gotten married. So I said, this thing, I'll also want to try it. Let me try and hear from God concerning my marriage so that probably I know the person I need to date or that kind of a thing. So I went to God and prayed, but I didn't know exactly how to pray because we were never really told how to pray. We only used to see people coming and saying, God spoke to us. But you see now they don't give you details, so you really can't tell how did God speak to them. And you don't have that chance to go and ask him in person, how did God speak to you? So I decided to also pray and see what God would tell me. So at first I began by asking him direct questions. Some of the girls that I knew at that time, I went directly to God and said, is this the person, is this the person, is this the person? But of course I never had anything, never got any kind of communication, never saw anything. So it puzzled me because why is God not speaking to me? Am I not hearing from God, or is it that I'm asking wrong questions? So I had some doubts. But then I persisted speaking in tongues because I was told if you speak in tongues, you will hear from God. And I had also learned that the times I heard from God clearly, or the times I saw visions clearly or seeing things clearly when I'm praying, was when I was persistent with speaking in tongues. I had spoken in tongues for quite some time. So I braced myself, actually took a fast to just dedicate myself to praying and seeking God. So I prayed and prayed and prayed, but no answer really came until a year later. So a year later, I was speaking in tongues concerning the same thing about marriage, but this time I was actually very tired about the things of dating and all that. So I was actually going to God to tell him I am tired, I've given up on this thing, and I've given up on waiting and all those kind of things. I'll just go the traditional way of finding somebody and the way other people just do it without the God speaking thing. So during that fast, as I was speaking in tongues, the Lord revealed to me a name. Just a name came to my mind of one of the leaders in church. And because I was praying about things to do with marriage, and that leader was married, I called him to tell him what had happened. So I called him and told him I was praying concerning marriage, and your name came to me. So I don't know, but maybe you have something to tell me or what to do. So that's when that leader now began helping me to understand what God was saying. So I went to him, we met, and then he asked me a few questions. Then now when he began asking me those questions, I began understanding some of the things I had seen before. And there were some dreams I had had before, and there were some visions I had had before. And then he began asking me questions, and then those things began making sense. So that's when I realized that actually God had been speaking to me as I had prayed and asked him concerning my marriage. It's only that I could not understand. So God had finally spoken to me concerning these persons, that I would go and ask questions so that I would go to him, then he would guide me understand the things God had spoken to me previously. So that was one of the incidences that I clearly remember God speaking to me, and at least I understood what he was communicating, and things progressed from there. So that was one incident that I clearly remember God speaking to me. So for somebody, maybe you are there, you speak in tongues, and maybe you have a challenge of knowing how does God speak to me, and how exactly do I know if God has spoken to me. The thing is, it is difficult to put it in words. And I came to understand that God made it difficult to put it in words, what it means by hearing from God, because God wants everybody to learn from Him what it means to hear from Him. God understands that human beings love shortcuts. So if there was a formula of hearing from God, then people would just go to that formula, and they will never really bother to go seek God and hear from Him. They will just go to a man of God and say, oh, what is God saying concerning my life, or how do I hear God? Then they will get those formulas, and then they will just go from there. But because God wants to have a personal relationship with you or with us, He will first require that we learn to hear from Him, directly from Him. And so that's why He may just lead you to somebody to guide you, but He will teach you how to hear from Him Himself. So the thing you can do is you just focus on speaking in tongues and then ask questions. Because when you ask questions, when the answers come, then you will know exactly that this is an answer from God concerning this question that I asked. So when you ask questions, it makes it easier to hear from God, because when God will answer you, it is a direct answer to a specific question you've asked, so it becomes easier to tell. So that's all I can share for now. But if you have any further questions concerning this topic of hearing from God by speaking in tongues, then feel free to ask it, and I'll see how best I can explain it. So that's it for today. God bless you. If you would like to support this work, you are welcome to do so. I'll leave my PayPal email on the screen, so you can send your donation. I'll greatly appreciate it. God bless you.